Today, facilitating this session, we have Ray, CEO of Sales Readiness Group. Ray, if I can have you turn your camera on to say hi to everyone. And then we have the special guest, Chris Pirie, CEO of Learning Futures Group. Ray and Chris, welcome.
Hey, that's
Thanks.
Great. Alonzo, really appreciate the introduction and the chance to kick things off here. Happy and thrilled as always to be here for our ongoing webinar series. And I'm just thrilled to be working with Chris Pirie and have the opportunity to collaborate and share some insights here. Chris, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself, but I just say, Chris and I have had a chance to connect and chat over the years, and actually going back to his original role as a global program manager for sales readiness at Microsoft, and actually, as I understand, chief learning officer of the Field Readiness Group. So kind of in that role, we talked a number of times about sales and sales training. And now Chris has moved on and founded his own group to talk about Learning Futures and the Learning Futures group. So Chris, again, very pleased to be here and have the opportunity to collaborate and chat about this. Let me turn it over to you, Chris. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your transition here, about the Learning Futures group, and kind of what's next for you and what you're excited about.
Yeah, cool, Ray. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to meet some of your customers and prospects, and I'm really looking forward to this hour. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm dialing in from San Francisco in my hotel. I'm out on the road, as I know you were this week, selling hard, so we're getting it done. Yeah, super excited. I did 108 quarters in large software companies. This was in the October timeframe last year. Really doing a lot of things around the customer training business at Oracle. Kind of ran some big chunks of that. And then a lot of work at Microsoft in both the customer training business, and then really for the last 8 years focused on this massive sales transformation that we had at Microsoft, and reskilling and getting people ready to sell in the cloud. That was a fantastic experience, very sophisticated sales culture, and we learned a lot. After 108 quarters, I decided it was time to do something other than corporate work, and I have a real passion for the next generation of what corporate learning needs to be. Skills are top of mind for leaders everywhere, sales leaders, CEOs, and even sort of government leaders. Everybody's anxious about where we're going to get the next set of skills and how we're going to prepare people for work in the fourth industrial revolution. So there is a ton of opportunity to get really better at workplace training and help take it to the next level. And that's what the Learning Futures group is all about. And we're talking to all kinds of people around the future of workplace learning and how to do really great sales enablement. And I'm a big fan of SRG. Go Seattle. There's a lot of thought leadership in the Pacific Northwest around this topic. So I love the work that you guys are doing too, Ray.
Well, and again, thanks, Chris, for kind of teeing it up, and also, the opportunity to kind of overlay what we're doing here at SRG with some of the cutting edge things that you've done in your past, and also that you're looking at moving forward. So again, that's where I think this really came together over the last month or so, as we've been working and talking about this. So just a quick introduction for myself. So again, Ray Makela, I'm a CEO and Managing Director at Sales Readiness Group. I oversee a lot of our delivery. I actually am still in the classroom facilitating, was yesterday with the client.
Cool.
And so get a chance to kind of see a lot of this kind of front and center. And one of the things, and we're a sales and sales management training company, so we have a curriculum that we offer. One of the things we're really excited about is the leveraging the blended and on-demand programs that we've offered through videos, but also using cohort sessions and integrating them into an overall program, which, Chris, we're going to talk about. So that's kind of our direction, and something we're very excited about that really dovetails nicely with some of the things you're talking about. So with that, let's go ahead and close out our webcams, Chris. We'll just save some bandwidth, and they don't have to look at us the entire time here.
So my mom always said I have a face for radio, so I'm happy to do that.
Well, no, it's been good to make the connection, kind of put the face to the name. But let's go ahead and jump into the content here. I know we've got some really interesting topics to work through, and what we want to do is really talk first about, how is sales changing? What's going on? What are some of the things that we need to be responsive to? How is sales training evolving with that? And is it still relevant? And then what are some of the challenges? What are some of the mistakes that we probably want to avoid as we go through? And then really sharing some lessons learned and case studies, and particularly from your experience, what are some of the things that are working, and how can we really use technology, leverage technology to continue to improve performance and drive sales growth. So I think those will be good kind of discussion topics and questions, and let's dive into it. So Chris, we were talking about what are some of those things that are happening out there. I know some of these trends have been evolving for a while. These are 4 or 5 that we thought were particularly important to hit on. And do you want to kind of kick things off here and just talk about a little bit about what are you looking at? I mean, with Learning Futures Group, it's like this is your space. This is what you're looking at day to day. So what are you seeing out there, and how do these are these relevant to that?
Yeah, fantastic. So I think, first of all, the umbrella thing, sales is work. And just before we even sort of dive into the sales domain, it's clear that the workplace itself is changing very, very rapidly. And I think you and I are of the demographic where, we used to manage to operate without access to the World Wide Web and without cell phones. Now, I think, according to Burson data, something like 37% of the workforce is mobile. We're going to talk a little bit about the volume of information that's coming at people every day. Again, Deloitte, the typical worker has just 1% of their work time to focus on structured learning. And they're absolutely bombarded by information from their devices and from social media and so on and so forth. So, I mean, this information overload, I know at Microsoft is kind of the #1 issue that I heard from salespeople is, where's the source of truth? What can I believe? I'm selling increasingly complicated things that are coming to market faster and faster. I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of information that I have to process and pass and kind of understand. I think that's definitely a huge issue for all workers, but absolutely for salespeople. You and I, Ray, have both talked about customer sophistication. The rise of the internet has given consumers an incredible access to information, price lists, competitor positioning, and there's a lot of data that says, before a person even talks to a salesperson at your company, they're already very, very educated, and perhaps as much as 60% down the path to a decision. And so the opportunity, if you're a salesperson, to influence is really narrowed, and you have to be able to have a discussion with that person who is very, very informed, not only on your products, but on your competitor product as well. So I know that you've seen a lot of that going on. It's a big issue for you. From my kind of Microsoft experience, Microsoft in many respects is all about the future of collaboration and collaborative software. And I think there's a real shift in the productivity tools that people are learning at work that is quite fundamental and quite profound. I grew up in the age of the email inbox. The first thing that I do and still do when I get to work is fire up Outlook and start working through the emails that have come in and the emails that I want to send out. The modern millennial workers are more comfortable in a social media type environment where they're sharing. So you're seeing things like Workday and Slack and Microsoft Teams come with a whole new paradigm about how you share and collaborate, not just with the people you work with, but also maybe even teams inside of your customer accounts. And so the very sort of fundamental idea that I'm a salesperson and I work for Sales Readiness Group is starting to change. I'm a salesperson and I work for Sales Readiness Group, and I also work for my assigned accounts, and I may have teams inside of those sales accounts that I'm working with. So net, the workplace is getting much more complicated. It's on 24/7. I feel like I have a little bit less control over what I'm doing. And then on top of all of that, Ray, this, we talked about this, my leaders, my manager, my marketing folks expect me to sit down with my customers and know their business even better than they do and bring them, actionable insights. It's a really tall order, and it's not getting any easier to be a salesperson in today's world.
No, I think that I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think it's really relevant to kind of what do we do next, right? That the challenge has gotten more difficult because the customers are more sophisticated and further along in the sales process, and there are more buyers involved, right? We hear that from CEB every year. I think it's up to 6.4 stakeholders involved in a typical B2B transaction. That means there's more people making the decision on the buying side. And one of the things we've seen, Chris, is with our clients, there are more people involved in the selling side. So now we have that need to collaborate, as you said, leveraging those tools to keep everybody on the same page, to make sure the messaging and win themes are aligned, to really have a coordinated and consolidated effort where we don't have the sales engineers in saying something different than the account executive and different than when the VP flies in and makes a C-level call, that they all need to be very well aligned and bring in the same insights and having the same conversations.
Yeah, no salesperson really wants their CEO showing up, I think, in a good deal. But that, we probably shouldn't say that out loud.
Right.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the software industry, which is where the bulk of my experience comes from, obviously is sort of notorious for kind of bringing a busload of people into a sales call, partly because of just the sophistication of the product set. You need technical specialists. You need people who understand the various different platforms. You need people who are deep in the account. And so, a good AE, as we call them at Microsoft, a sort of account manager, relationship oriented salesperson needs to be a quarterback, and they need to coordinate increasingly sophisticated sales cycles, I think, depending on exactly what you're selling. But yeah, that's true. Just one more demand that says, it's getting tougher to be a really effective salesperson unless you stay agile and keep learning.
Absolutely. And for us, it really boils down, and again, we're looking at it through somewhat of a training lens, but it means that the salesperson needs to be more relevant, right, to break through the noise and to really get the attention. They need to be able to coordinate all the assets, as you said, be the quarterback, and they need to know where is the customer in their buying journey so that they can either meet them or guide them along the way. So some of those foundational skills are still incredibly relevant, but in addition, then they need to be able to educate and collaborate and work with the team. And you had a quote, Chris, that I think summed this up very pertinent and very well regarding salespeople. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's the transition, or where do you see that going for them?
Yeah, we say learning is the new selling. That's our kind of buzzword around this, the Learning Futures Group. And I think what we mean by this is just observations that we've made in terms of cutting edge companies and how they're approaching their customer relationship, increasingly through this lens of student teacher, learner teacher. And I'll talk about that a little bit. Look, so I'm sure there was a lot of virtual heads nodding when we talked about how tough it is to be a salesperson these days. And there's sort of two responses to that, isn't there? That you can just work harder. What I would say is, at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to work hard enough to stay on top of all this kind of stuff. And so your other option is to kind of work smarter. And so the philosophy that we have is helping, modern workers, whether they're salespeople or information workers, really get good at being learners. And what I learned at Microsoft from some of the great sales leaders that we have at Microsoft is that selling is really about listening and learning. And the way that software companies in particular have sort of set up the engagement with customers, it's through this kind of learning lens. And so you might say that to be a great salesperson, you need to be learning in a couple of dimensions. You need to be really on top of your own products and services, and you need to be constantly learning about the value proposition and the technical aspects and the features of functions of whatever it is you sell. And then you also need to be approaching your customers through this mindset of being genuinely curious about their business. Because the more you can learn about their business and the industry they're in and the challenges they're facing, the more you can connect the dots with them between the services you offer and the problems that they're kind of struggling with. And so this is sort of like fundamentally having a mindset of curiosity, being really open to learn more about your customer and learn more about your own company. On the flip side, your job then is to be a teacher and to really help your customers and potential customers understand your products, and more importantly, in this sort of collaborative approach, work with them to help learn together how your products and services can help them accomplish their mission sort of more effectively. So it plays out in some really kind of tangible ways. For example, in the software industry, there's been a massive shift in sales resources from people focused 100% on the actual transaction, the signing of the paper, the closing of the deal, the ringing of the bell in the sales office. And now you'll see increasingly software companies are putting resources into post-sales activity. Like it's great that, you know, company X has just bought our software as a service platform. When it comes time to renew in 2 years or 1 year's time, if they're not really using it and they're not engaged and it's not helping them do their run their business more effectively, then they're not going to renew. And so you've seen this real shift in sales activity from before the signing to, of course, still before the signing, but very much what's often termed customer success. And so that fundamental activity of selling has changed, and it's all about helping a customer be successful and teaching them how to use your products to make their business more effective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, very, very well said. And I think it is the supporting. I mean, some of these, again, are foundational skills, as you mentioned, but it becomes even more important that we're, you know, adapting and keeping an eye on where that's going. And also, as, you know, training and sales enablement professionals, are we providing the resources at the point of need? Are we enabling the sales team to be good educators, to be good teachers of their prospects and customers? So I think, you know, now we're seeing, how do we pull all of that together? How do we even manage all of that and deliver what we need at the point that they need it, as opposed to they're going to get it all during a 3-day sales kickoff and then you know, their brain's full and then that's it for the year.
Yeah, so I think a couple of observations there. One is the fundamentals are non-negotiable, right? You absolutely can't achieve this sort of nirvana-like state of sales guru to your customer unless you understand, you know, with pure muscle memory, how the fundamentals of selling work. That's absolutely a non-negotiable. I want to make that point super clear. And then the second thing is to achieve this state, to be a great modern salesperson, you need to be learning every day in a combination of things. I think we're going to drill into it later, but you need to be making time, yes, at sales kickoffs, but also throughout your year to develop yourself. It's just the only way you're going to survive is to be agile and be a daily learner in a world that's changing so rapidly.
No, that's a great way to kind of encapsulate, as well as an intro to kind of the next section. And I want to keep us moving here, because I think it's interesting to look at, you know, what does sales training even mean today? Is it still relevant? And where is that going to go as we look at you know, some of these other trends? So let me, you know, kind of tee this up, and then I'd love to get your perspective as well. We did a survey last year with Training Industry, and we looked at close to 300 salespeople and sales organizations, and really tried to get an idea from the salesperson's perspective. What did they think was most important? What skills were most important to their success? And then we actually looked at how were they performing, and how did that equate to whether they thought the training was good that they were receiving, right? So we really tried to get for us, the customer viewpoint, which how is sales training resonating for those customers, and how does it is it making a difference? You know, what correlation can we draw from those? So not surprising, and Chris, be interested in your thoughts on this, but you know, the top skills that the salespeople thought were still relevant and important were, are they able to be curious, ask questions, and understand the customer's need and the impact of those problems, right? Are they able to build relationships and collaborate? And as we were talking about that collaborative aspect, I'm thinking about our business where, you know, now that we're using video to interact, we're texting more now, and it's one of those things on kind of our roadmap. Once we get a prospect's text and they kind of opened up and we're texting, you know, that's a different level of conversation than waiting for them to respond to an email. So so that idea of building, you know, solid relationships and then presenting value, which, you know, we define as that whole domain around being able to recap what we heard, but provide our solution in context of the customer's problem, and then educate them on why this is the best solution and why they should move forward. And that's really your education piece as well. So, you know, those were three that jumped out. But I'm curious, as you look at this list, any surprises here or any comments you'd make?
Yeah, well, it's a long list, right? This is back to the you know, how busy people are. I'm really thrilled to see customer centricity at the top of the chart here, and I think you know, there's a lot of thinking and discussion in the industry about what we Microsoft call customer empathy. You know, it turns out that one really good way to engage with people is to listen and ask a few open-ended questions and just listen really hard. And yet, you know, I tell a personal little story, if I can, around that. You know, we ran a program at Microsoft that we poured our heart and soul into, you know, teaching people how to pitch. And we called it the Pitch Perfect program, and it was a big high-scale program, 40,000 coaching sessions around how to tell our product story. And you know, much smarter sales leaders than me sort of came in and said, look, it's really good that people understand our product and, you know, can pitch and deposition a competitor and, you know, tell the value proposition in an impactful story. But how about we spend a little bit more time doing listen perfect? And I think that's, you know, what that sort of leader was getting to was the real opportunity is there by understanding and really deeply empathizing with the person that you're selling for, like really understanding what they're trying to do, really genuinely having this mindset of curiosity. And I think it's good. So it's great to see that at the top of the list. I actually would say give 2 thumbs up for that. The relationship piece, second, is, you know, that's kind of a controversial one a little bit. There's been a big trend, as you know, Ray, in this sort of recently about the insights and being a provocative salesperson, you know, bringing insights and cajoling your customers to transform and sort of bringing to their attention what their competitors are doing, and this sort of like insight-led approach. I still actually think that's about building relationships. You know, sometimes building relationships, you know, people just think about the golf course. But no, like really being a truly value-added partner to your customer is really developing valuable relationships too. They want to hear the truth from you. They want to have your point of view on things. So yeah, it's good. But yeah, there's a lot of things as well.
No, and I just want to follow up on a couple of comments you made. You know, one specifically to building relationships, because one of the things we like to talk about and is in our program is the idea that part of building relationships is having a shared experience. And if you can work through a shared experience, which may include challenging them, right, and asking hard questions, and maybe it's even a little uncomfortable, but you'll likely come through that with a more solid relationship and respect than if you just go in and say yes to everything, and then they're like, well, wait a minute, I could have done this myself. So I think that's absolutely a critical component. The other part of that is around active listening, and I was chuckling because when we go through that exercise in our workshops, either in our sales training or sales coaching, we do it in both. And it's always kind of one of those, yeah, we know what active listening is, we've maybe been through it before, but then they practice it and they go, wow, that was really refreshing. Every single survey we do, they come back and say, that was actually really refreshing to go through that and practice and be intentional and really think about that. And it also goes to the idea of building the relationship, because people like to be acknowledged and listened to. And I think Dale Carnegie said 100 years ago, right? They will like you more because what you know about them and what you listen than what you tell them about yourself. So let's do more of that, right?
Yeah, let's absolutely do more of that. And I think your point is very valid, that it's something that we have to learn to do and practice and do deliberate practice. We all think we're good listeners, and it's very, very easy to illustrate that that's not the case. So yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Active listening, super valuable skill set, and one that requires deliberate practice.
Great. So, again, these are kind of foundational skills. I'll just share this, and happy to make this white paper and infographic available. We'll have contact information at the end, or you can respond to Alonzo, because I know he's in all of your inboxes from the invites, and we'll get it to you. But, the interesting thing as we're kind of looking at the takeaways was when we correlated performance to the people that responded and the selling skills, those that rated their sales training as effective, in other words, they kind of liked it, they thought that the training was valuable, actually were outperforming, right? So they had a quicker ramp up time, which has a very, very tangible ROI, right? If you can get somebody ramped up to productivity quicker, by attainment of quota, that pulls through. Also on close rates, and we just looked at, are they winning more than half of their deals, and there was a correlation to those who thought training was good also had were more effective at closing and had higher close rates. And then maybe one of the more interesting ones too is job satisfaction. Sales training, and not surprising, if they're being trained, they're likely to feel better about what they're doing, but they had higher engagement and job satisfaction, which pulls through to retention and turnover. And when we think about how competitive the marketplace is, how expensive it is to hire the wrong person, anytime we can save somebody and through better training, we thought that was pretty compelling. Any thoughts on any of those metrics as well?
Well, that's a shocking difference made around job satisfaction. I know employee engagement is a really hot topic for talent leaders across companies. No surprise, it's a tight labor market, and it's really hard to find good people, and it's really expensive to retrain and rehire good people. And there's a lot of industry data, Ray, as you know, around the power of doing great onboarding and setting the standard and tone. There's one company that I'm working with right now. Their sales turnover, they typically have people in job roles for less than 3 years. And so if you think about it, it's probably like 6 months to ramp up in a complicated sales environment. And then, by year 3, people are sort of checking out. You've got a very narrow window of that person performing. And there's a lot of data that says, like, if you do a great job of onboarding, you really pay attention, you set the standards that you expect for people, including the mindset about being a learner and so on and so forth. It's very, very powerful deployment. But it's also, there's also a little bit of a myth out there that experienced salespeople don't need training. They've just figured it out, and they've got the right kind of muscle memory, and it's just, they're natural. They've got the artistry. And I had a couple of really great examples of people that we worked with, both in Oracle and Microsoft, who sort of started the conversation. We brought them in as subject matter experts for various programs that we were going to do. And I would say they'd start the conversation with the mindset that, look, I'm a seasoned guy, I'm doing $750 million a year. You can't really teach me anything. I've been at this a long time. There was a lot of that kind of attitude. And it's really great, and I'm sure you see this too, Ray, to watch people kind of, maybe they reluctantly come into this program, and then at the end, first of all, they learn there's a lot that they can learn, and that is part of this growth mindset approach. And secondly, they just get better through this deliberate practice and the focus, and that's a really great thing to watch.
Absolutely. Well, I think the more we can do to encourage that and make it valuable, you have to think about, okay, what was it that led them to say that training was more effective or not? And also, we could assume that if they're doing training better, they're probably doing some other things better as well, like the onboarding, like how they're engaging those employees. So, likely job satisfaction is higher because, they're probably doing other things well. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. I just wanted to share this. And I know there was a question that came in about the list of skills that we used. And I would say, we just had them select skills. So we provided a long laundry list, as you saw, and just had them select, the salespeople select what was most important. So that was, basically just a general list that we pulled from in terms of what generated that, because I think there was a question around that. But again, happy to provide the more detailed report and white paper around that. So let's continue on. One of the things that, as we're looking at sales training, is that comment you made earlier, Chris, about moving to a learning and training mindset, and what does that even mean? And I know you've touched on some of these thoughts, but it's an area that you're speaking and writing and researching as well. Can you talk a little bit more about what is that trend, and how do we help the sellers take on that learning mindset?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is based on the work of a professor from Stanford called Carol Dweck, who's written this fabulous book called Mindset. And it's actually a very useful book, both in terms of work culture and your work life, but also, your private life. And if any of you raise children, it's kind of interesting as well. And this has really been foundational to a pivot at Microsoft. I think Satya's written about this in a book called Hit Refresh, and over the last 5 years, he's been on a mission to really build a learning culture in the company, including in our sales teams. And he talks about that as the journey from being the know-it-all company, a bunch of smart geeks who have all the answers, and a journey from that state to a state where Microsoft can become the learn-it-all company. The company that genuinely engages with customers and prospects with this growth mindset. And so the sort of the 50,000-foot view of what growth mindset says that you come to any situation with either a fixed or a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you already know what the answer is. You're the expert. You don't need to listen to anybody. You don't need to learn anything new. You've been there before. You just know what's got to be done. They're examples of, kind of fixed mindset.
Right.
In a growth mindset, you come with curiosity, and you're not afraid to fail, as long as you learn something in that failure and it makes you better and stronger. And you're genuinely curious, and you genuinely understand and believe that you and everybody around you can get better. And if you're in the learning business, like Ray and myself, like this shouldn't be a big shock, because we spend our entire careers making people better at what they do, or helping them make themselves better, I guess, better way to say it. But there is a lot of prevalence of this kind of fixed mindset. Hey, I already know what the answer is here. Let's not waste our time. And so we think a lot about how to apply that to selling, especially if you buy the concept that great sellers are great learners and great teachers, and what are the kind of things that sort of demonstrate growth mindset in a sales context. Taking time to do training and creating the space, both the time and sometimes even the physical space, for your teams to invest in themselves and get training from experts and develop their core skills and learn new skills, is one great example of what a company that's a growth mindset company will do. And at Microsoft, we spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and frankly, countless hours, helping our many, many sales teams get better at what they do. We took sales training and sales readiness incredibly seriously, and it was a very sophisticated machine. But you don't need to be Microsoft to do that. You just need to kind of follow these kind of approaches. Approach every situation with a deep curiosity, especially around your customers. If you're a sales manager or a sales leader, this is probably the hardest one of all, but kind of embrace risk taking and give people space to find things through mistakes. It's even hard to say that out loud, but these things happen. It's where we really learn. You kind of miss a deal, it slips into the next quarter. You understand what that costs you in terms of your compensation and your pipeline, and you don't do that again. So we all learn from mistakes. That's kind of common and fundamental to the learning process. And I think it's sometimes hard for sales leaders to really get the value when that happens, rather than just get cross and shout at people. You take the time and space to study and learn new approaches. I guarantee there are people who you're competing with or not competing with who know some things that you don't know, whether it's training companies like SRG or whether it's your competitors. A good learning mindset company is actively engaged in doing all of the above. Coaching is really important, and it's a skill itself. It's a skill and it's a discipline, and it can be done very, very badly. And it's more about helping people come to their own realization than telling them what to do. And I see lots and lots and lots of, telling people what to do as a right. Sort of coaching. And I know you guys, you're kind of really big on that space. I think a growth mindset company is all over coaching. And then everybody, I think the best way to sort of frame this up is to say, be ready to teach. And that to be prepared to teach something, you really have to learn it first. You can't kind of fake your way to teaching. And so that's kind of a thing that we look for when we're doing sort of benchmarks of companies around learning culture is do people have an opportunity to teach each other and connect with people across the organization who've been in the situation that they're facing. Maybe it's their manager or maybe it's just something else. So I like this. It's a broader view of what, how you create an organization that has sellers who are just consummate learners. Part of the responsibility is on them as individuals, but most of the responsibility is on the leadership and the people who set the culture and the environment and the coaches and the managers to really be thoughtful about this and make some space for people to learn so that they can be successful in this rapidly changing world. Does that make sense? That resonate with you, Ray?
It absolutely does, and tying it back to the kind of sponsorship, and I'm thinking about as we're delivering programs, it really does. And even today, we see some prospects, some opportunities where training is still seen as an event. Excuse me, and we're trying hard to look at that as it may be a blended program that includes an event, but that needs to be in the context of a much larger discussion about the application, the chance to try those things out and then collaborate or get together in a cohort session and talk about what worked and what failed, and then to have the managers or coaches engaged and involved in continuing to hone and improve those skills. If we can get the executives and the stakeholders bought in and if they kind of support and sponsor that, I think we're in much better success. It's one of the things we'll talk about as a success factor, but to look at that as a journey as opposed to we're just going to do these skills and then we're done with them. So I think it really ties that in, and I like the language that you used. The more that we can talk about that as it's really changing the mindset, and we're going to provide some resources that'll help support that over a period of time.
Yep, 100%. Definitely a journey. If certainly at Microsoft, we don't claim to have had any victory around building this culture. We learned a lot of things on the way, and that's fine. One of the most interesting words, Ray, that you might like around this topic of embracing failure, which I think for sellers is probably one of the hardest pieces to sort of get their head around, because we want to win, we want to close, we're competitive. But even in sports analogies, like that there's the opportunity to learn from failure is just huge. It's basically how learning works. And there's a really powerful word that Carol Dweck talks about, and that is yet, right? And if you find yourself saying, boy, we didn't close that deal, versus you find yourself saying, hey, we didn't close that deal yet, it absolutely sets the tone. That tiny little word sort of shifts the tone from we failed to, we've learned. And so that's kind of useful word for any sales managers on the call. Find yourself thinking about that word. How do you take something that feels like it's gone, the wheels have come off, and turn it into an opportunity to sort of go to the next level?
No, I love that. And even thinking about some of those other skills, if we say, well, they're not a very good closer, or they're not good at negotiating,
Yeah.
well, they haven't developed those skills yet, or they're not good yet.
Yeah.
But let's work on that, right? Let's develop a
absolutely
coaching plan.
And you just give permission to people to get better, and it's super important.
Yep. So I do want to be sensitive to our time. I'm sure we could talk about this all morning, but let's get some feedback from the group here. What I want to do is actually talk about how people are learning themselves, and thinking about, as we've got a mixed audience here, we've got sales professionals, learning and development, sales enablement, and also a mixture, I'm sure, of ages. How do you prefer to understand or learn something new if you're picking it up? And let's see what the audience said. And we purposely didn't do a poll here. We'd like to get your chat so that we're not kind of biasing the results. But if you could just type into the question box, so use that as your response, and we'll pop that out and kind of comment on this as we go. But love to get people's thoughts on how they prefer to learn something new, and we'll relate that to kind of the next section as we talk about learning styles. Chris, I'm curious from your perspective, what's your preference?
Oh, gosh, learning by failure. I'm a big reader, Ray, and I also. It's interesting. I'll share an anecdote here. At Microsoft, we did a survey. We're sort of the sales readiness organization, the sales enablement organization. We did this big survey to the top 200 people who win the chairman's award at Microsoft, or the sales leaders award at Microsoft. They get to go to the conference, they get to stand on the big stage, they get a jacket, they get some compensation lift. It's just a real honor to be one of these people at Microsoft. So we surveyed them on just this question: how do you best like to learn? And the number one answer by kind of a country mile was, I like to learn from my peers. And then sort of followed, I like to take classes, and I like to do e-learning, and I love this particular program that you guys run. But really, it was about coaching. It was really about finding people who've been in the situation you're in and getting some advice from them. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think, I feel like that. I do learn kind of deliberately. It turns out that the act of learning is actually pretty hard, and you have to give time and space to read and contemplate and practice. But all of the above. I'm doing it every day.
Yep. And we're getting some great responses in here. Christopher mentions he likes to learn through application, which I think is, put me in that situation, ideally with a coach over my shoulder, or the idea of kind of on the job, just in time when I need it, but let me try it out. Mark's comment definitely resonates with me, which is kind of an integrated, right? You want to kind of read it and understand it, but you want to practice it. Ideally, you want to put it into play in the field and get some coaching around it. And then ultimately, to be able to teach it, or to be able to present that back, as we're talking about becoming a learner and teacher. I think that's a great opportunity, and something we talk about, which is once they've mastered a skill, as we're talking about a progression, have them come back and present to the sales team, have them integrate that into your kind of coaching plan, so that they can really rise to another level, and also empower the team, because now they've learned that and they can apply it. So it's interesting. And again, that's why we didn't ask you just to provide one response, because I think, some people like to watch a video or read a book or, go to training, but typically it is an integrated approach. And I think I'll share one anecdote for myself, Chris. I'm an adult onset mountain biker, and I've been spending some time on the trails here in the Northwest, and absolutely love it. But there is a lot of technique, there are a lot of technical aspects. But what I realized is I can watch 1,000 videos, but that's not the same as getting out there and having somebody say, you know what, here's why, that isn't going right for you, or here's why you're not making the progress. So I think there, it's, I watch the video, get some instruction, get some coaching, go back and apply it and practice it. And I think really that's what people would probably migrate to if we have the opportunity. But, in my case, it's the idea of trying to keep the wheels pointed down and not come back banked up. So that's putting into practice.
Well, I think in that case, Ray, at least your motivation is pretty clear, like coming back in one piece, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't want to tell my wife that I've gotten injured, and the feedback mechanism is very distinct, because if you're not doing it right. But we've got some other good comments here. Brandon mentioned self-paced and an opportunity for failure, as you mentioned, in a controlled environment. So I like to joke in our classroom that, hey, if we're not practicing in a safe environment, it means we're practicing on our customers. And that's a really expensive way to do training. If we're out there practicing that presentation or practicing the questions we're going to ask without having done that in a safer environment. So love that. I'm going to keep us moving here. Don't want to completely run out of time, but appreciate the feedback from the group. We just wanted to touch on a couple of other areas. One was, if we think sales training is still relevant, we want to move them to be more learners and teachers. What are some of the things that are getting in the way of good training, and how can we avoid that or get past that? So let me just cover and love to get some of your thoughts here as well. We've compiled our own list of why we think projects are challenged. Sometimes we'll come in to help either rescue a project or come in after there have been challenges in place, and some of the things that we look for at the start to see, can we help to address these up front? Starts with strong sponsorship, no surprise there, but we still hear oftentimes training is because, hey, there's a budget or there's a place on an agenda, but the VP of sales thinks differently, or there's a different vision about what it should be. And that's really a recipe for a challenging situation. So we want to try to build that sponsorship. We want to, if we can, build the business case, the what's in it for them, how do we align it to get that, and make sure that we're solving the right problem, right? So starting with not just training, but what are we trying to accomplish? What's going to be different at the end? And if we're looking 6 to 12 months out, what's going to be different that the VP of sales is jumping up and down and she or he are celebrating because this was so successful? If we have a hard time defining that, we probably have a little more work to do, right? And then, go ahead if you have a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think that we've talked about, definitely 1 and 7, right? Leadership, sponsorship, and manager reinforcement. These are really things about the culture of the organization, and we think a lot about culture and this journey that a lot of great companies are on right now to figure out how to build a great learning culture. And those two pieces, I think, are mission critical. So people follow the leader, right? And if the leader sets an example, if the leader practices, growth mindset and is happy to talk about areas for improvement and opportunities where we've learned through failure, then that's super powerful. What I would caveat that with is you can't, you have the leader that you have, and so in light of that, the leadership around this can come from anywhere. I mean, it can be a super ambitious sales manager, or it can be an individual contributor who just wants to set the bar. They just want to, demonstrate how important it is to be a learner and to find the space. And some people have more influence than others, but this is the culture thing that I talk about. And managers, really, there's a lot of discussion and attention on sales managers right now. And with a lot of the data that's available now from the systems that people sell from, the manager's job is increasingly about the human skills, like really coaching and getting the best out of people the manager's job as things like reporting get more automated and insight generation get more automated. So they're two things that really pop out for me as areas to really work on. Things like real life scenarios and customized to the business. That's really about the quality of your training provider, and are they just bringing pre-canned stuff, or are they deliberately listening to you and understanding where you should focus?
Absolutely, and I think we hear that because as soon as the salespeople feel like it's generic or it's not relevant to them, they start checking out, or they're the hostages instead of the participants. And if we can get into the situation, having them feel like they're applying it to their own accounts, it's a real life scenario. They're doing some real work that they can apply the following week. Now they are engaged and excited, ideally. But your point around the managers, I think, is so critical, that the key job should be, how do we grow our team, how do we create leverage? And we can't do our team's job for them, even though it seems like oftentimes the manager is the chief closer, they're the chief problem solver, they're the negotiator. And in fact, they do the reps' jobs for them, and they're happy to have that done. So we need to teach them to be good managers and leaders as well.
Yeah, lots of great stuff about people over-functioning as leaders and the hero leadership model, right? At the end of the day, the job is to develop more capacity and get more people capable on the team, not do everything yourself that you won't scale.
Absolutely. So the last section here, Chris, and I want to leave a few minutes for some questions, but to really pull this together, and love to have you, if you could, you've alluded to some of the work you did at Microsoft and other organizations, but talk a little bit about that journey, that success, and some of the things you've seen, and especially around leveraging technology and what you see happening within some of your clients and within experiences you've had. And I know you referenced the moving from know-it-all to learn-it-all culture. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that and how you approach that at Microsoft.
You bet, Ray. And I think I wouldn't say success. I would. I don't think anyone at Microsoft would say success either. I would just say learning and progress. And Microsoft as a company has been on this extraordinary transformation from selling packaged software to the people in your IT department, to providing cloud services, for $20 billion worth of revenue, and that was a hard transformation in many ways. So there's maybe three things I say. First is very, very complicated sales landscape at Microsoft. We have every kind of sales, to be honest with you, from retail in the Microsoft stores through inbound, outbound telesales that are deeply wired to marketing platforms. And then, of course, large enterprise sales, multi-million-dollar government size kind of deal. So we had these amazing sets of workforces and a very sophisticated system to enable them and prepare them. And so, but they all had to make a journey. And the journey was, as I said before, from just selling technology and speeds and feeds, as we called it, like the features and functions of a product, to really creating value in collaboration with our customers, and selling these subscription products that you have to put the effort into after the deal has been signed. So there's a lot of change in the group. The leadership from the top was crystal clear, and it's expressed in this quote here from Satya. That's we want to move from a know-it-all company to a learn-it-all company. And I think one of the groups that had perhaps the most challenge with that was the sales teams, who we talked about propensity to love failure, very low, propensity to not hit numbers, very low, and so they didn't feel like in the sales teams there was a lot of space for a learning mindset. And yet we were able to transition. And some of the training interventions that we did, we learned a lot from. And I know the Sales Readiness Group kind of has this approach too. For us, these were very mission driven. not a transaction, not a one-off sales training day, but a mission that you would go on. And at the end of that mission, you would have achieved something in terms of developing new skills or capabilities, but more importantly, it was done in the context of your day-to-day work. So you'd have made some sales as well. Like everything we taught was real examples, and the missions we gave you were really with real customers. So you get that kind of double duty. We use a lot of technology, using the access to information and the mobility that people have and the tools that they have, so that they could kind of learn in large part on their own time and study on their own time, but constantly come back to teachers, mentors, managers, and cohorts to sort of regroup and share what they've learned and to kind of reflect on what's happened. So we built a lot of pretty sophisticated programs. At the end of the day, set the culture and the expectations that we want salespeople who are learners. Then create the space in the calendar for them to sit down and learn, share, discuss, reflect, and then give them missions to do deliberate practice in a real work context, even using their customers as guinea pigs in some cases, but really sort of like practicing what they've been taught and what they've learned and reinforcing it. At the end of the day, the neuroscience around this is very clear. To learn a new framework or a new approach or a new philosophy or a new product or a new customer business, it's hard. Your brain is a very busy piece of your body, and to get its attention and to get it to move things from kind of awareness and short-term memory into long-term memory and create new behaviors is hard work. And you need to engage with training professionals to get that done, and you need to help develop this new mindset through the culture in your organization. I think that's what I took away, and we're trying to find out other examples of companies that are doing great work around that. So if you think you've built a learning culture, then we'd love to hear from you.
No, I think that's great. And I think it is, kind of a heads up to all of us to keep that in mind of how do we encourage and continue to, I guess, have those conversations to bring in those different aspects and, ideally tie it together. And, the idea of blended training has been around for years, but what does that mean in today's environment? And I'll just share this and then we'll wrap up. But this is what we're using with our e-learning and video program, which is not just the idea of we're going to put some videos out there and maybe there's a quiz or some gamification, but let's provide that kind of semi-synchronous learning environment, right, where we're checking in. So they have some videos, but then we're going to have assignments or missions, as you mentioned, you used at Microsoft, and then we're going to get together and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to see, and we're going to hopefully learn from each other and learn from the mistakes, and they're going to have access to the tools and the resources ongoing. Ultimately, some way of gauging if they're making it through. Are they, healthy competition, I think, is great. So if we can gamify that or at least share the results, now that encourages adoption and compliance, which has been a huge challenge for e-learning over the years. So I'd echo your comments. I think, it's all still a work in progress in terms of how do you get this right and how do you encourage the right amount of engagement without overdoing it, and get people to really come and participate. But I think it is really exciting to see how that's evolving and some of the tools and technology that's making that easier to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've lots to learn, and definitely the Microsoft stance and the Learning Futures Group stance is a humble one. Like, there's some things we see and we like, and they appear to make a difference, but there's no cut and dried formula yet that we can work. But we do know that making space for good learning, creating the culture, working with professionals, having a standard set of core operating procedures that everybody's kind of drilled on can really help.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to get your experience and see what's actually working or what you've put into play. So, I'll just leave with a couple of takeaways, and we covered a lot of ground. And as you said, we're happy to continue these conversations. I'll provide contact information. If people have follow-on questions, feel free to email us. reach out. We'd love to continue the conversation, both from a training and from a Learning Futures perspective. But we kind of went on this journey. We talked about customers being more informed. How is sales changing? How do we need to stay and be relevant? And what do we need to do to become learners and teachers? How can we encourage our sales professionals to change that mindset? They need to continue to add value and insights throughout the process. And how can we evolve our training mindset, if you will, to be more blended and to address those different training needs that people have. Ultimately, things like cohorts and gamification help with engagement, keep them involved, and providing the information at the point of need so that they can apply it and continue to learn as they go. I think we'll be in a much better situation going forward. Any final thoughts from you, Chris? How would you wrap all this up?
Hey, just be a learner and help your people be learners, and it's worth the investment. It's worth the time. Just do it.
Absolutely, love it. Well, I'll leave with this slide. Again, contact information here. You can hit us at info@Sales Readiness Group, or feel free to link in to me. So Ray Makela or R Makela at salesreadinessgroup.com. Chris, your information is here as well if you'd like to follow up. And with that, and I know we're a little past the top of the hour, but Alonzo, we'll take questions offline if they've been coming in as a follow-up. But let me go ahead and I'll turn it back over to you to wrap up. Chris, thank you very much for an absolutely wonderful and engaging conversation. Always enjoy collaborating and talking about these topics with you. So thanks again for being with us.
Yeah, likewise, Ray. Thanks. I learned a lot.
That's great. So Alonzo, back to you.
Thank you, Ray. So just one quick note. After I turn the webinar off, there will be a short survey popping up. We appreciate any feedback you may have for us. And that's pretty much it. Well, thank you, Ray and Chris, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.